helping someone through a particularly difficult time, like death of a spouse or a family member, or helping them transition to a different job or move to a different location, and seeing that kind of relief that washes over them to say, oh, all right, we've got a plan, it's handled, I feel good about this, I feel confident about that, and I've got Scott taking care of this stuff. That's very rewarding.
All right, Scott, so I have a question for you right off the bat.
Yeah.
Talking about finance. You've been doing this for a long time. A lot of people are uncomfortable with finance. Mm-hmm. They're not good at managing money, or they just don't spend time on it. They're working on other things. But it comes very naturally to you. I can attest to that as one of your partners here at Stonehouse. But why is that? Where did that come from? You have a love of managing things financially and sort of organizing. You're very organized, very pragmatic. So where does that come from?
That's a great question. I think
you have to be honest. This is an honest
an honest answer. Okay, yeah. I was raised on a farm, which doesn't typically lend itself to a financial manager necessarily, but I was given a lot of autonomy, I think, as a kid, and I think I had to create my own solutions and own answers and kind of come up with my own structures for getting things done, and so I think that lent itself well to becoming a financial advisor late in life. I was always interested in computers and technology. I really wasn't much of a farmer, and so when I went to college, I kind of sat down and had a conversation with myself to say, when I'm done with college, what do I want to do every day, as opposed to I think a lot of people go into college just saying, I don't really have any end goal here. I'm just going to go through these 4 years and hope something happens at the end.
And have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and have a lot of fun, yeah. Yeah, so, somewhere in the first year, I really sat down and said, what do I actually want to do? And I landed on finance and investment management. I didn't know exactly what area of that I wanted to be in, but I felt that I had some strengths there. So I changed my major to focus on economics and finance. And originally it was business management, and so I changed slightly the direction and focused on economics and finance. I transferred colleges in there, and their majors were a little bit different, but ultimately I ended up with a finance degree, and that's kind of how I ended up being a financial advisor. Early on, I was managing a retail store while I was finishing up my college degree. And I had actually applied for and got offered a job for one of the larger financial advisory firms. And that's when you approached me. I think you plucked me out of the retail career that I was in. And we started this great adventure, which is now called Stonehouse. And that was back in 2002 is when we really started having those conversations. And the very beginning of 2003 is when I got my licenses and got up and running for investments and investment advice and life insurance and health insurance, and just sold mortgages at one point early on when we got this thing started up. So we had to kind of get a feel for what worked, and ultimately investment management was where our strengths lie. And that's kind of how we evolved and how I evolved in that career.
That puts you somewhere around 19 years. So let's talk about this. So we have been, I think I'm 24 or so years in the industry. Mm-hmm. You're 19. So I was doing this, roughly 5 years before that. And when we first started talking, I remember saying, you either need to be an attorney or you need to be my partner in the financial business. And for better or worse, you chose this. And I'm glad. I hope you are.
I think I'm happy with my choice. I'm still deciding. But
yeah, well, so when I first started, I was about 5 years in a larger firm and sort of learning the ropes and building my own client base, and then had the courage to finally go off and become, work on the independent side of things. But the question for you is that I'd love to hear your input on, maybe some stories here and there, is you were with me when we officially started Stonehouse, mm-hmm. and we left the large broker-dealer world and went out on our own, completely on our own, mm-hmm. and found ourselves literally sitting around saying, all right, how do we do this?
What do we do tomorrow?
Exactly. So, do you have any anecdotal stories that you wish that you can say here on camera of how those things played out in your mind?
Yeah. So it was kind of the Wild West for us in the beginning. We had a generalized direction that we wanted to go in. We didn't know how we were going to get there. We had to gain a lot of skill sets and knowledge. And we had to try things out because some of the things we tried initially just didn't resonate with our audience. We wanted to do modular-based planning for a fee, but we couldn't find anyone that was interested in paying for modular-based planning for a fee.
The industry was a lot different back then,
too. Yeah, a lot of different things. So when we started, you particularly came out of that insurance-based world, and that's kind of where financial advisory was in this area particularly. At that time, it was insurance-based, and then, occasionally somebody had an IRA, and you would help them invest that as well by selling them a mutual fund, and you would sell them an insurance product. So to be a registered investment advisory firm at that time, Montrose, was somewhat unheard of, to start your own company in that rural part of Pennsylvania. That was more for the the wealthy people in Boston and the city centers that had large amounts of wealth. And so we sat down and said, how can we do this best? And we decided that fee-based planning and advisory services was the best. And that's our first company's name was Robert J. Brown Planning and Advisory. And
See, so, I'm over 50. I forgot that.
Yeah, I know you forgot the name of it. Yeah, so that was only for about a year, and then I bought into the company, and then we switched the name. But initially, we were going after financial planning, and that didn't pan out quite as well. So we pivoted, and so when we were kind of coming up with some of those ideas, we had to write them down on something. And so a lot of the times, the only time we had to talk was at lunch. And so I still remember a day at the Stables, several days at the Stables restaurant in Montrose, which is no longer the Stables restaurant anymore. But we used to scratch out our plans for the future on a little white napkin, and then we'd have to flip it over because we'd run out of room, and we'd write on the back, and then we'd bring that back to the office, and then we'd have to transpose that on a piece of paper so we knew. And that was back before technology was much of a thing, and so a lot of stuff was done in paper at that time, even in our industry. And so we'd keep all our plans on a little yellow pad, and we'd kind of plan out what we were doing next. And a lot of seminar planning. I remember you and I used to do just seminar after seminar after seminar around the area to get ourselves known and to get some clients and get our feet under us. And eventually it just kind of kicked in. It was a slow start. It was a little scary there for the first 3 years or so.
It was exhausting. The seminars were a lot of late nights.
Yeah. So exhausting and scary, and then eventually somewhere in like the third year, give or take, it just some things kind of clicked. We got a couple clients, and then they started referring people, and our investment portfolios did really well during the financial crisis. And so overall, that was my most vivid memory, I guess, of that startup phase, was etching those plans out on a white napkin at the Stables restaurant.
Shout out to Bruce and Dennis at the Stables restaurant and the Blue Plate special, which
we
was
owe
always
you
my
everything.
favorite.
We owe you everything.
Let's talk about you started alongside me. We wore many hats. We still wear a lot of hats today, but they're different, right? So when we started, we were first and foremost, we were an advisor to our clients. And then when we weren't in front of folks and we had stuff prepared for them, we spent the rest of the time running the company and researching and building, right? But you went from that role to now, we're a much larger firm. We have a team of 20-some folks that we work with. We're managing, at this time right now, over $400 million in assets, somewhere around there. Now you're Chief Compliance Officer. Whether you wanted to be or not. So how did you get into that role? How did you go from point A all the way to where we are today?
It was the fact that nobody else raised their hand. And so as entrepreneurs, we were starting out in 2003 timeframe, and there were 17 roles, and there was basically Bob and I sitting in an office, and so we had to do those 17 roles. And so we just kind of divided them up based on our are strengths, and I have a strong penchant for nerdery, and so digging through all of those codes and regulations at all the different levels. We're regulated by a lot of different industries, including Pennsylvania securities, banking and securities, Pennsylvania insurance, all the other states that we do business in, all of their regulatory bodies, plus primarily the SEC in our case at this point because we're larger. And so digging through all those regulations and requirements, determining what we need to do, when we need to do it, creating a compliance program that can be taught to all of the other employees at Stonehouse, just kind of fell in my lap. And so I ran with it, and sometimes it keeps you busy. There's a lot of work there, and I always end up being the bad guy because somebody's like, "Oh, this is gonna be great." Bob will come to me and be like, "Oh, let's do this thing. It's gonna be awesome." I'm like, "No, you can't do that."
Podcast.
Yeah, right. I'm like, "No, you can't do that." And he's like, "Why not?" I'm like, "Well, because of this regulation, and this regulation, and this doesn't let you do this, and this doesn't let you do this." And so then we have to reconfigure it and mix it and make it very complicated and convoluted just so that we can get that thing done. And so. It's not always the most fun job out there, but it's very important. And most of the regulations are designed around best practices. And so it kind of forces you to be the best version of yourself just because you have to adhere to all these different regulations. So it's good that we have a heavily regulated financial market. I think sometimes there's some overstepping there where they're micromanaging to a degree they don't need to, but at the same time, I think it's important. And so that's kind of how I came to be a compliance officer and just continued with the role. I could have offloaded it, but I think it's very streamlined with me as a compliance officer because I'm working in the business every day. And so I can get a very quick turnaround time. I've built some technological structures so that we can get an approval process and somebody can submit marketing, I can review it, I can approve it, and it can get out the next day. Where with a lot of larger firms, it can be weeks before you get your materials back compliance approved.
I was just going to say that the difference between you versus, a large firm where I started from is when you ask the compliance department in a big company, "Hey, can I do," before you even finish the sentence, as soon as you say, "Hey, can I do," they say, "No." Mm-hmm. "Nope, can't do it." "Nope, just do these pre-formed things. That's all you get to use." But even though you do come to me and say no right off the bat, you are very open and willing to work and say, how can we make it work?
Right.
And still apply the rules, work within the rules the SEC or any other governing agency has over us. So, you don't get a thank you very often, but I'm giving you a thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And the office works pretty darn smoothly, with all those efforts. It's a thankless job. The industry as a whole is challenging. It's tough. The market's unpredictable. Mm-hmm. People are unpredictable. Yeah. Right. And then you have to manage all those difficult things and do it within the rules that are given to us and changed year after year, time to time. Do you are you a glutton for punishment, or do you like a challenge? Is it worth the rub? Yeah, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I like the challenge. I heard somebody once say entrepreneurs are the only people that will exchange a 9-to-5 job for an 80-hour-a-week job just so that they can take Tuesday mornings off. And I think that's true. I like the opportunity that I could do anything I want to do at any point, but with that privilege comes great responsibility in that I end up doing a lot more work than I would do if I was employed by someone. So weekends, evenings, when a job needs to get done, it needs to get done, and so you don't stop working until it's done. And so I end up not vacationing very much and not taking much time off, but I have the option to, and that's important to me.
You can take that Tuesday morning if
I can take that Tuesday morning as long as I work all day Saturday and Sunday.
Let's talk about like a Tuesday morning, or let's say the reason you do what you do. Can you think of a moment or two where there's been a defining situation where you're saying, you know what, like you literally drive home that night, or you go into your office, you close the door, and you go, that's why I do what I do. That's why I go through all that stuff. Yeah. So I have moments like this. Anything come to your head?
There are a few things. So I wear different hats, and so I still have a book of business. I manage $20 million of client assets, give or take. a couple dozen clients, and so I'm, involved in their lives and helping them through great times and difficult times. And so, helping someone through a particularly difficult time, like death of a spouse or a family member, or helping them transition to a different job or move to a different location, and seeing that kind of relief that washes over them to say, oh, all right, we've got a plan, it's handled, I feel good about this, I feel confident about that, and I've got Scott taking care of this stuff. That's very rewarding. And then in my other roles, managing the business with compliance and technology, and helping people grow as advisors, I think seeing new people develop new skills, new skill sets, and feeling more confident in their careers and their roles, and growing and learning, and seeing them really kind of take off from becoming just new to the industry and not really having much knowledge of it. And then, 3 years later, they're experts in their field, and they can really work autonomously and produce some really positive results. And so I think those are probably two examples, at least, of what keeps me going every day.
I know you always told me you wanted to be a professor.
Yeah, I could see
Stone.
that. Yeah, I could see being a professor, because I like to talk a lot and have people forced to listen to me. So that works out.
Well, it's neat to teach, right?
Yeah.
It
really
it's
is.
great to
Yeah.
learn, but I think it's actually better to teach somebody. One of the things I find is really challenging about our industry, and fun at the same time, is it's a lot of math, which we like, a lot of people don't. But it's also kind of the art and the science. I often used to say that the science would be the math behind everything. It's kind of black and white if you just look at the math. But then the art is trying to explain that math to your client, to the folks in front of you, and how it actually applies to their life. And so it's kind of it's almost like a math and a psychology, kind of like smashing together here. And so how do you balance that? Do you find that difficult through the years and working with folks, or?
Yes and no. I like the puzzle, and you're a big puzzler.
That's
you and
private.
your daughter.
Don't tell anybody that. That makes me sound like a nerd.
Bob and his daughter do puzzles constantly. I like the puzzle of finance. I like putting the pieces together, making them fit, figuring out how to optimize that for people, and then explaining that to them. And there's an amount of anxiety that comes with being kind of to exaggerate maybe a little bit, being the thing that's between a retiree and financial ruin. So you're making plans for these people so that their money lasts their entire retirement, and they don't want to have to go back to work when they're 80 years old. And so there's a lot of responsibility there, and I take that responsibility seriously. Times in my career, I've taken it way too seriously, to the point where it's ruined a lot of days for myself. And so if you're in this industry, you really need to be able to manage that almost overwhelming responsibility to your clients, especially in market downturns, with all the things in the market that's outside of our control.
Right.
You can build a great plan, and then Russia ruins it all pretty quickly. And so you just have to be flexible. You have to be able to control the things you can control, and be willing to let go of the things you can't control, just to kind of keep your sanity.
Yeah, it's your own psychological game.
Yeah.
So on that topic, you're segueing me very nicely into the next thing. So you just
great.
talk about, the fun part. We talk a lot about the fun stuff, but there's no job is blissful, right?
Yeah.
And this certainly has a lot of stress in this job.
Yeah.
But it's all about managing stress for your clients and for yourself. How do you? Let me see how I want to ask this question. What frustrates you about the business, or about what you do on a daily basis? Yeah,
there's a lot of variables, some that are in our control and some that are not. And I think early on in the business, we started from scratch. So there were no processes, there were no structures, there was no technology built around these things. And so there's just all of these kind of landmines out there, and you're like, all right, I'm going to steer around this one, I'll steer around this one, I'll steer around this one, and you take them as they come. And then as you're hiring additional people to take over those roles, you're like, they don't know where any of these landmines are. I just spent 10 years memorizing where all these landmines are, but how do I convey that to someone else? And so over the past 10 years, we've built a ton of structures and processes and procedures, daily audits, quarterly audits, monthly audits, annual audits of our client books, and specialized processes within those audits to make sure that we don't step on any of those landmines. And so to answer your question, the landmines, the things you don't know that are buried just under the surface that are out to get you, and then to control that and to manage that anxiety, essentially having all those processes and procedures in place to teach yourself and others a repeatable process to say, all right, don't step here, don't step there, walk this line and you'll be fine. And so I think that's kind of a two-part question, the problem and the solution.
Yeah, I'm a metaphor guy. I love
that,
the landmine thing.
Yeah,
it's actually
trying
really
to
good
get
way
a
to
boat
look
in
at
there.
it.
I should have done.
Yeah. So you mentioned building, when you're bringing people on and trying to show them where those are. Let's talk about when bringing people on. So we've grown from just you and me tearing up napkins at a local restaurant, right, and building this out on literally on paper to where it is today.
Yeah.
And we have, as I mentioned earlier, 20-some people that we work alongside of. Each one of them we've hand-selected and asked to be a part of our team. So what is it that you're looking for when you look to add an advisor, a support staff, or whoever?
Yeah, I mean, there's different kind of different mentalities and different wants and needs across different categories of employee. So you want to make sure you match the right type of person to the right role, because somebody that's a good fit to be an autonomous advisor that wants to be rewarded for their work proportionately to what they generate, but has to work much harder and be autonomous and be creative in their work processes to do that. Marketing, things like that, more creative roles are one kind of subset of people. And the other would be those people that just really love kind of doing the same thing every day. They like the predictability of it. They like to dig through a to-do list, and by the end of the day, they're done with their to-do list, and they feel good about themselves, and they go home. And so you want to match the right role with the right persona there. There's different management science techniques about types of people with entrepreneurs versus managers versus artists. And so if you start looking at the science of how to manage teams in that format, it really helps you kind of determine what people are right for what roles. Ultimately, I think most things in personal engagement and marketing in general comes down to know, like, trust. So the know means that they have an identifiable persona. They have, who they are. They have a unique voice. They have a genuineness about them. They're not faking things. You know who they are, and you know that they're a good fit for the role. Likability means that you're going to want to come to the office and talk to them every day because we spend as much time as we do with our spouses sometimes, with our coworkers. And so you want to have an enjoyable life, if possible. And so you want to work around enjoyable people. So likability is important there. And then trustworthiness. You have to have some sort of understanding that they can actually do the job that you're hiring them for. And so I think know, like, and trust, and then understanding that people are kind of either entrepreneurs, managers, or artists, and you want to put the right person in each of those roles.
That's a great answer. I love that. It was fun listening to that answer.
Well, thank you. I'll be a professor soon. I'll be teaching management science.
There you go. Thank you, Dr. Stone, again. All right, last question then.
Yeah.
And this might be the hardest one for you to answer.
Great.
What's something that very few people know about you? Maybe something I don't even know about you.
Is interesting.
Should I play the Jeopardy music while you're thinking?
I got it down. That's probably copywritten. We're going to get sued for that. But
I don't think it sounded close.
It's my compliance officer. Yeah, right. Everyone's like, what was that song?
Yeah.
Something that people don't know about me, I was raised on a farm. I don't know if that's super interesting. I've written about that before. I managed a retail store while I was in college, and that's probably something people don't realize. I sold stereos for several years to pay my way through college, ultimately ending up managing that store in a busy retail center down in the Poconos. And as part of that, I guess tying it into some things that kind of prepared me for this career, as part of that, it was a Bose retail outlet. They make stereo systems, and their sales process was that people would come in to browse, and in the back of the store, they had this really well built out miniature theater. So they had a big screen and theater seats, and the sound system, the Bose sound system in there so that people could sample it. But to get them to get the maximum wow factor, they didn't really understand what they were getting into when they went through this door. So it's hard to get people browsing to get into the theater. Sure. And so we would have to do this big production. So we had these velvet ropes outside the door, and then one of the salespeople would have to get on the microphone and say, "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're starting our next Bose music theater performance. It's
oh,
blah,
no.
blah, blah." And you have
that wasn't you, was it?
Build it up. I was terrified the first time. They just threw me the mic. It was like my second day on the job. They're like, "It's your turn." I'm like, I can't do this. I can't. I mean, there was like, it was a busy Saturday. There was like 70 people in the store milling around. And they more or less said, "You have to, or you're fired." And so I did it the first time, and my shaky voice, and my probably 20-year-old self at that point, just kind of unsure of myself. But by the third or fourth time, it felt natural. And then by the 10th time, I'm hamming it up. I'm like dancing and singing, and so I'm very thankful for that job because it really prepared me for the presentations that we did, public speaking, things like this, being comfortable on camera. And so that is something people don't know about me. I was an amateur performer inside the Bose Music Theater to get people to join the music theater performance.
Well, that truly, I can't believe I've never heard that story before.
Yes.
But I will say, I do remember when I was, and I'll use the term recruiting you loosely, but when I was trying to convince you to come on board with me, I remember thinking to myself, like, you were getting offers. Like, they really wanted you. You had really done a fantastic bang-up job, and they wanted you to go to next level management, and you're right out of college. And I remember thinking, I can't believe you have to compete for this little punk. He should be loving to be able to work for me and get paid almost nothing. But there was a little competition. I'm glad I won, and I hope it worked out well for us. But who knows where you'd be over at Bose. But I'm glad you chose Stonehouse.
Yes, I am too. Yeah, it worked out well.